know you guys released a statement yesterday, but just on the, I guess, a day on or a couple of days on now, just the reaction from the club of what happened over the weekend with Josh, because obviously, you know, it's an issue that continuously pops up in all sorts of sports. But how is the club, I guess, reacting at the moment to, I guess, the incident that happened with Josh over the weekend?
Yeah, so Josh alerted us to the incident at the game on Saturday night yesterday, and the last 24 hours has really been twofold in terms of investigating to see if we can get to the bottom of what was said and who by, and then also obviously making sure Josh, his well-being is first and foremost. He's had, obviously has a significant profile now globally, but with that, and particularly given the sensitivity around his announcement as the first active or the only active professional male footballer to come out as gay, has caused him a little bit of, or I would say ongoing abuse over the last couple of months that we've needed to manage, and him and his team have had to manage as well. So the last 24 hours have really been identifying specifically what happened, but then also making sure Josh's well-being is first and foremost.
How do you investigate something like this? Because obviously when you've got a large game with a large amount of spectators, what's the process in trying to single out a specific individual or a group of people? What's the process going forward? Are you guys looking to investigate these specific offenders, or run me through the process?
Yeah, so the process is firstly initiating an investigation around the time frame and when it occurred. So we've spoken to Josh yesterday and then again today, and it happened in stoppage time as he was walking off the pitch. He was subbed around about the 95th minute, I believe, and as he was walking off is when the abuse came from the northern stand. So we've identified a time frame when we think it occurred. Now it's a matter of providing that information to the league and also Victory. And then the more specific investigation in terms of CCTV footage, broadcast footage, is then reviewed based on those timeframes to see if they can identify any individuals.
Ollie, I'm just going to go to the floor now.
How's Josh feeling?
Yeah, he's good. He's a real resilient young man. Like we've spoken often about the courage he displayed in terms of coming out and everything that went along with that, the pressure that was on him then as a global voice of the LGBTI plus community was significant, and he's handled that. As you see, he's been playing well this season. He's taken that all in his stride. With that, as I've mentioned, has come some abuse, particularly on social media, and I think where this went a little too far was the quantum of it. It wasn't an individual, it was more of a collective voice coming out of that northern stand and he said, basically, enough's enough, I'm calling this out. And we said, we're right behind you, Josh. So he's in a good headspace, but as anyone would be, being abused online or in person is obviously not a pleasant experience. So we'll support him through it and ultimately want to get a positive outcome, which is initially investigating and seeing if we can identify any of the people involved, but also the messaging that comes after that this is no longer acceptable in sport, and we're continuing to work with the league and also Victory on what that may look like in the future.
So we get him to mute his phone, we can hear it coming through the mic. At the other end, he's going to have to mute it.
So, Ollie, when you're not talking, can you mute, please?
Yeah, sure, mate.
All right, so just mute again, and I'm just going to continue to the floor. All right.
Nate, you said it's ongoing. Like, has this? What's he been getting week to week, Josh?
Well, social media is the main one. So it might be on his own posts. We've even seen it on posts of other players, where Josh is referenced. So he's got people that working with him that actually help him monitor that. And I think he's been well prepared mentally, but also professionally to deal with it. But it's not an instance where this is the first time this has popped up since October 27 last year. It's something that Josh needs to manage, and the club, we support him obviously through it day to day.
As bad as it is, he obviously knew something like this was going to happen at some point in time. How has he been able to handle it all the way through to this point and prepare for that inevitable sort of?
Well, we had a discussion around the inevitability of this before 27 October. I mean, we sort of said, look, on the flip side of this, he's arguably the highest profile men's player in the A-League now, in terms of his global, the global reach of his name and brand. With that, our sport as being global means that he gets comments from all over the world. Majority positive, but there's an element that is negative. And that is ongoing. Again, we flagged that and discussed that in October last year. Our media team monitor it constantly in terms of the posts that we go out with. And as I said, he's a real resilient young man, Josh. So he knows the good and the bad that comes with it. This was a bridge too far in terms of the quantum of comments. Just went beyond what was acceptable. I mean, it's never acceptable, but it just was that sort of collective voice coming out of that stand, which Josh and we can't tolerate.
You mentioned that it was more of a culmination with the social media posts. In terms of the stuff that happened in the ground, is this the first time that he's heard any of these sort of things?
I think there's been comments made in the past, not by our fans but by other fans, one-off sort of comments that he's heard, just coming out of the crowd as he's playing, or taking a throw in. This was the first time that it was felt like directed abuse, like a sort of a collective ganging up on him, so to speak, because he was walking past that stand. He'd obviously been subbed off, was walking with medical staff back to the bench. So I think that's where, again, this was that next level that it's never acceptable, but this was, unacceptable and needed to be called out.
So what do you say, Nathan, as the CEO of the club, what do you say to those fans that are in the stands on Saturday night ganging up on Josh Cavallo?
Yeah.
What do you say to them?
We don't want you in our game. It's as simple as that. We've seen it in other sports. I mean, race has been a big issue, obviously for our code, but in other sports where fan behaviour's been questionable. And it's quite simple that we don't want anyone that's going to abuse our players for any reason involved in our sport, So hopefully, if there is a positive side to this, it's a catalyst for change in education. We're doing some work on a potential Pride Cup game this year, to raise more awareness around this issue. We want our grounds, and particularly Cooper Stadium, but obviously at away games as well, to be really welcoming and inclusive. We want people coming to our games feeling safe, and that's the sort of behaviour, and be it abuse of any nature, isn't welcome. And the simple message is, we don't want you at our games if that's what you're going to bring to them.
Josh noted that there were a few people that called it out
Mm-hmm.
and stood up for him and the cause at the time.
Yeah, that was a positive element to it. I mean, he got messages on social media saying, "Yep, we heard the comments. It was disgusting. We're with you, Josh." So that was good. That I think there is an overwhelming sentiment of support from the majority of fans. I think it's an element that need to be weaned out. That this is 20, 30 years ago. This is the sort of language that was probably more common. Now it's not acceptable. I don't want my young boys at a game where where abuse is being held from the stands. And I don't think any families do. So it's good that he has had the support from Victory supporters in that instance, saying, "Look, that wasn't on. We're with you, Josh."
In Josh's Instagram posting, he's sort of called on Instagram to sort of act more, seen in the past around the world, teams doing blackouts and stuff like that. What do you think needs to be done from these social media sites to stop the online abuse?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of elements to it. There's the social media campaigns. The challenge with social media, and one of our great frustrations with it, is the anonymity. A lot of the accounts that we've had abuse from in the past, and we get generally after every match. You only have to look at a post-match Instagram post to see some of the comments that we get, just regarding the result. But what we're looking at specifically is a Pride Cup game here this year, where the messaging will be built around providing an inclusive environment for people to come and enjoy the game. This has been an issue that, again, Josh being the first or the only active professional male athlete to come out as gay, it's something that our sport and all men's sports haven't addressed. So we're looking at that for later in February, and it's hopefully something that then rolls into a 12-month campaign, and forms part of what will be Josh's legacy, far beyond his days at Adelaide United.
Just hold it. Ollie, I'll go to you.
Hi, mate. So do you think, obviously it might be a bit of a band-aid approach, but do you think the stadium management themselves are doing enough? Because when we hear that there's an entire stand, I guess, launching offensive language and I guess a crowd noise coming from that end, is the stadium doing enough to, I guess, shut that kind of noise up, or is there not a lot that they can do?
Yeah, well, look, I won't classify it as an entire stand. As said, there was a collective voice out of there, which made it hard to identify individuals. But there were individuals in that stand supporting Josh and calling out the behaviour from what we understand. But ultimately, the stadium authority now kicks into gear, and it's something again that we'll speak with our staff here at Cooper Stadium, particularly around security and having them monitor this type of behaviour. I won't suggest that it's prevalent or has happened here in the past, but it's something that we need to be more aware of. And then in the sense for Amy Park, this is where the CCTV footage and analysis of the coverage comes into play to see if they can spot any of the perpetrators.
Has Josh said anything, or they're here at Cooper Stadium throughout the season?
I think he had something from an away supporter earlier in the year, but he only alerted us to that yesterday. It wasn't something that again, it's not tolerated even if it's one individual, but he sort of kept that to himself, and he said, well, then this was too much, and then spoke about that. So it's something we'll work with the stadiums, both home and away now. Like, it's something that we'll need to address with clubs interstate to keep an eye out on this and how we monitor it. And I think the active supporter groups at clubs will play a key role in this as well. You've seen some of the messaging out of the Red Army this season in support of Josh has been really positive, so we'd hope that other active groups take on that moving forward.
How did he actually inform you? Did he tell you individually, or was it to Ross after the game?
So it was yesterday just via phone, so he spoke with the media team and then myself, so then we just sort of talked through what happened, the next steps, how he's feeling. It wasn't something that was addressed immediately after the game, it was yesterday.
With the Priority Cup game, do you think sort of having that and sort of spreading this messaging will encourage other people from other codes that maybe have been toying with this idea, or should they come out to be themselves?
I'd hope so, and I think that's where Josh's legacy will, as I mentioned, go far beyond his time at Adelaide United. I think what he's made clear is it's not necessarily about him. He doesn't want young athletes, be they elite or otherwise. I mean, it's just about young men and women playing sport. He doesn't want them to go through the same experience that he did as a 15, 16-year-old, not thinking that he had the opportunity to play professional sport, So I think that's where it's about providing an inclusive environment in the stands, but also educating coaches and players around what it means to create an inclusive environment for your teammates as well.
Is it more disappointing to come in such a big rivalry game like Melbourne Victory? You've gone the whole year, and it just turns out that it happens to be the Melbourne Victory game here where there was a comment made, and the Melbourne Victory game over at Melbourne where he's started to call it out. Yeah,
we haven't travelled much. We've only played 7 games, so again, it just so happened we played Victory 3 times in a month. So law of averages that would suggest that was probably the most likely. But I mean, it doesn't really matter where it comes from. I just think the opponent is somewhat irrelevant. It's the fact that it was said and is there that is the disappointing element to it. It's not to finger point at clubs. It's really about making sure that it doesn't happen again.
What did you make of Melbourne Victory's response and the A-League's response? Did you feel that you got the support and Josh got the support?
Yeah, well, I've spoken to Victory and the league, and they're quite strong on this. Like they've sort of made clear that the full force of their investigative powers will be thrown at finding out, or seeing if they can identify individuals or groups of individuals that may be involved. And we'll continue to discuss. I'll speak with APL and Victory again this afternoon, just in terms of the latest information we have to hand, and then it'll sit with those two parties in terms of carrying out the investigation.
Do you expect any individuals to be found? It's always hard to track them down in this situation.
Yeah, I think. Look, it's difficult. It's difficult. There's more cameras at our games than there ever have been before, and the security infrastructure at Amy Park is probably the best in the country. So look, if we are going to do it, this is probably the instance where we can, but we have to let it run its course. Then we can't preempt anything. And I think what's as important as it is to identify the perpetrators, it's the messaging that goes beyond this. I think it's what Josh, calling it out has been something that's been common in his, narrative around this, is that we don't need to accept it, and if we don't identify who they are, then it's not the end of it. So we're not just going to tools down once the investigation's done. It's something that needs to carry on this season, but then also beyond Josh, when one day, he departs Adelaide United.
Do you mind if I just ask one football question at the back of this? Today, the Ben Halloran deal is official. The Stefan deal is still in the works, and we expect to be official soon. The money that the club gets in from these transfers, will you be, or the club be allowed to spend that in this transfer period, or do you think that it goes towards other areas?
No, we'll bring in at least 2 players in this next window. So the window opens for us on Friday in terms of the ability to register players. So we're at the 11th hour in terms of finalising deals with 2 players, 2 attacking players to come in and bolster the squad. We've obviously signed some replacements as well from Adelaide City. They become eligible. Lockie played last night. Assad becomes eligible on the 14th as well. So the squad will be bolstered in the coming days, and expect to see announcements out of the media team this week.
Diego Castro was one name on the weekend that was linked to the club. Is that someone that you guys would be interested in bringing in?
Oh, there's been a lot of names. I mean, I think fans sometimes think we sit dormant on recruitment, and it's only when you see an announcement that it actually happened. But there's been dozens of names, and our recruiting goes everywhere from the local NPL to every country in the world in terms of agents contacting us. So yeah, we've had a look at a lot of players. As I said, we're close to finalising 2 at the moment, one out of Asia, one Australian, that hopefully in the next sort of 48 to 72 hours we can announce.
Good.
Thanks, Nathan.
Good.
Wait, thanks,
Ollie, you all
guys.
Good?
Hi, mate. Can I just, I'm not sure if you've already asked it, but what kind of loss is Halloween to the Reds?
Sorry?
What kind of loss is Halloween to the Reds?
Well, he's one of our most senior players. He's a leader on and off the park. Really good human being, Ben, first and foremost. But with these sorts of deals, obviously there's financial elements to it. But this is sort of once in a lifetime opportunity for Ben and his family, and a sort of game-changing move for him. So we weren't going to stand in the way of that. Obviously, the agreements needed to be signed and worked through all the specifics. But look, he'll be a loss for us. Fantastic player and fantastic human being. But we're confident that with the recruitment that's happening at the moment, our squad will be stronger moving forward.